Welcome, and welcome back to Brandler Bits. I'm Jeff Brandler. On Brandler Bits, we cover an awful lot of topics. And today we have a special edition of Brandler Bits. It's going to cover the back-to-school jitters. And on this episode, it's not going to be our regular format Brandler Bits. It's going to be a special interview. So I have a special guest. Her name is Renee Brandler. She is a retired educator, and she is lending us her expertise about how to handle those back-to-school jitters. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Jeff. Thank you for having me.
Why don't you tell our audience, because they're not familiar with you, about your experience?
Well, Jeff, I had worked for many, many years in the field of education, basically my entire adult life, for over 3 decades. Many of those years were spent as a teacher in the area of music and special education. I've worked with high school students, middle school students, young elementary students, in public school setting, in a private special education setting with children as young as ages 5 up through young adults of 21 years old. And as a school administrator, I worked for many years as a principal of students in grades K to 5.
That is a very impressive resume. Now, kids are returning to school. It's a new ball game for them. It's a new ball game for parents. Sometimes the kids are going to their next year. Sometimes they're brand new. As we have older kids, they might be changing schools. They might be starting college. Can you lend us some thoughts about how all this goes together?
What I've observed in my many years as an educator, and also as a parent, having raised 2 now grown children, I feel that no matter what the setting, whether it's private school or public school, whether it's in a suburban area or more suburban urban, whatever the cultural background of the students, the ethnic background, the socioeconomic background, and whatever the experience of the children, whether they're new to a school or whether they're, as you said, changing schools or going on to that next milestone, perhaps switching from elementary to middle school or high school to college. One of the things that always stays consistent is that I truly believe that parents generally want what's best for their children. They want them to have a great start, and the parents want to do whatever they can to help ensure that that happens. Teachers, administrators, everyone who works with the children are excited that the school year is starting. But there's also that feeling of nervousness, a good dose of anxiety and nervousness that comes along with anything. With, as you say, change is possible. Well, change is possible. Change can also be held along with a bit of trepidation about something new. As a parent who has raised children and been on both sides of this story, I think that it would be so helpful to parents, and it's an honor to be here with you, Jeff, so you can lend some of your expertise as to some of the strategies and what parents can do to help calm themselves down so that they can help calm their own children down.
Change is possible, as I like to say, but change is also very scary. And whenever there is change, anxiety or fear, or jitters, or nervousness, the butterflies, they're all interchangeable words. I use them all the time. So our listeners today should think about which of those words they like best, because I'm going to throw them all out, and they all mean the same thing. Anxiety is the word that I use because it's common in my office to talk about anxiety. And anxiety is like all emotions. They're all on a 0 to 10 scale. Well, they're really on a 1 to 10 scale. No one has 0. So on this 1 to 10 scale of anxiety, you don't want a 0 because you're not with us. And nobody needs a 10 because that means you're just not functioning real well and you're coming out of your skin and your brain is not working because your emotions are running the show. So as we think about the jitters, as you were talking before about all the different things that happen with teachers and with students and parents and whatnot, I could imagine that there's just lots and lots of things that you've seen. So I wonder if you've given a thought about what would be your top 10 anxieties for back to school and some tips for our listeners.
Well, that's a great question. I mean, it's the end of summer. Everyone talks about what was the top song of the summer, or what were the top 10 songs of the summer. Being a musician, I guess I like to think in that manner. there's certainly many things, very justifiable things that people might be nervous about with the start of the school year. But when I think of the top 10 anxieties or worries that parents have when their children are going back to school, some of them have changed a lot since I began my career in the 1980s, and some of them have stayed very consistent. And although our environment around us may have changed with social media, with the different ways that we hear news stories and begin to think about things that might make us even more nervous, some things have never changed. And one of the things that I think the top 10 anxieties for parents, the top one I think for everyone, is always, will my child be safe? Certainly the context of that may have changed greatly in the past several decades, but very basically, will my child get to and from school safely? Will my child be safe when they are in school? And is the building safe and secure, the building that my child will be in? I think these are on the top of most parents' list. In particular today, I think that it would be very unusual for a parent not to be thinking about that.
In the world we live in, I mean, as we approach September 11th and the anniversary of that, I mean, how could we not think about safety as being the most important thing on everybody's mind?
It's a very valid question, and you said before that we would discuss some tips to help parents. I do think that one of the most important things parents can do is to be informed. Most school districts and or private schools will let parents know the basics of what they are doing, what improvements they've made, any changes to school security. Certainly, much of that information needs to remain confidential in terms of exact plans. However, parents should feel reasonably confident that the school administration, the Board of Education, are working with the local law enforcement and broader to do all they can, to do everything they can to help keep the children safe. But that raises a question for parents, because what if your child is asking you, how do I know I'm going to be safe? And that is something that if you're feeling insecure about and you feel like your child's asking a lot, you can certainly reach out to your child's teacher, to your child's school counselor, to your child's principal to find out some of the things that they do in the school to help reassure your child that they can feel safe.
You know, I read a recent article about all of this in terms of kids and their fears, and one of the things the article talked about was just listening to your kids. Don't tell them you have nothing to be worried about. Just listen to it, communicate it, even if possible, do a dress rehearsal for, I guess, in this case, drive to the school. Obviously, you can't get into the school, but just kind of walk them through, okay, this is what's going to happen. Here's where the bus is going to drop you off. Here's where you're going to enter the school. Here's what the process is going to look like.
And even if you don't have that opportunity to do it ahead of time, and your child comes home from school and says they can't remember where they're supposed to line up at the end of the day, or they don't remember where you're going to drop them off, you certainly could take a ride over and show them. But even more importantly, you can reassure them that if they're not sure what to do, to ask an adult at school. There are so many adults at school ready to help the children. And in most cases, there are older students in that building who are there to help. So the younger students are probably going to get the most attention from the adults, and the older children love to be good role models and helpers. Maybe you have a neighbor or an older sibling who kind of knows the ropes and knows how it goes and can show the younger child.
Now, we're talking about elementary school kids, I would imagine, but how about kids going into high school, for example? Would the same rules apply?
Well, one of the things that I always noticed was that middle school and high school kids have many of the same jitters and nerves, but in particular, the middle school ones are going to be a little too cool to let you know that. So they don't want anyone to know that they're nervous. But in this modern age, we spend so much time in schools with social emotional learning. And as I said, older students and role models, there probably has been some type of an orientation or some type of a visit to the school even before the children went into that grade level. Again, just saying to the child, making sure that they're organized. You have everything. I think if children feel organized and ready when they go into school, they're less likely to be as nervous. So for your older child going into middle school, asking them a little bit about their schedule once they get through that first day or two. They're not going to tell you. When you ask them, how did it go with school today? They're probably going to say fine or nothing or it was stupid.
You want a conversation with an adolescent?
I don't know, Jeff, but I haven't had many of those where a child, as a parent or talking to parents, when the kids come home from middle school, whatever happened at 8 o'clock in the morning seems like 2 years ago, and they're very interested in maybe their social aspects or getting their homework done. But if you're getting the sense that your child is struggling with how to get from class to class with something like their locker, again, my best advice to parents is talk to your child, but also don't hesitate to reach out or tell them. Even more importantly, give them the skills, give them the confidence that they could reach out to someone and ask for some help.
So the word empowerment here would be a key word.
Absolutely. We talk a lot about resilience these days. I like the word that you just used, empowerment. As much as it's important to help your child all the time, one of the things that I've always felt is that if you give the children the skills to do some of their own problem solving or to know where to ask for help, they're going to feel safer and more secure in their environment. Something very basic with a younger child, have them help you pack up their backpack for the next day. Put the backpack by the front door, so it's their job to pick up the backpack when they go out the door so they remember they need to bring it. With an older child, it can be something as simple as, whether they're doing it virtually on their device or if they're doing it on a pad. Do you have everything that you need today for all your classes? Maybe they have an alternating type day schedule. Did you remember? Do you have everything that you need for your Tuesday schedule? They're going to get mad at you. They might look at you like you're crazy, but you're starting to help them remember that you're not going to do it. They're not, if they say that they didn't have something ready for school, it's not your fault. It needs to be their responsibility.
But herein lies the other thing about putting the child and giving them some autonomy and giving them some power, because in order to do that, the parent has to feel that they can do that. But we start to segue, at least in my head, to the parents having some anxiety and what if little Johnny doesn't do this, and what if, the two most dangerous words in anxiety, by the way, what if. And so now we're saying, okay, so we're going to give the child some autonomy, we're going to give them some empowerment, some resilience, some ability, and now the parent has to wrestle with, can I do this? What do I do?
So one of the things that I often said to parents of elementary age children is practice at home, giving your child some autonomy. For example, I know many of us have very, very busy schedules, so the idea of the family dinner hour may not be what it used to be, and that's okay. I'm certainly not judging that, but whatever that looks like, whenever it's time to eat, give your child a 2-step direction. Hey, it's your job, Johnny, to go get the napkins and put them on the table and fill everybody's glass up with some water. Okay, they might spill it. You might have to do a little mopping of the floor. Okay, so some napkins might land in the water and you might have to go out and buy some more.
So this would be inconvenient, not tragic.
Exactly. If they don't get it right the first time, that's okay. But when they do it, you'll say, hey, look, they were able to take a little responsibility, and the child's going to be like, oh, I'm a part of this family. You want the child to feel the same way in school. You want them to feel like they're part of that school community, and it's their job as a student to have certain responsibilities. That responsibility might be as simple as remembering to bring my snack, my lunchbox, and my backpack to school. And when I get to school, my job is to put those things in my cubby or to put those things in my locker, whatever age group we're talking about, and to remember where I put it and to take it home at the end of the day. And what is the worst thing that happens? What's the worst thing that happens if they don't do that perfectly the first few times? As you say, Jeff, it's inconvenient. It's not tragic. They'll learn when they finally achieve that ability to be independent. They're going to feel really proud of themselves. Children feel safer and more secure when they feel confident in themselves. And you'll probably hear me say that a lot, but I truly believe it. And I've also seen research that states that, but most importantly, I've observed it many times. The child that I saw that was all over the place as a 5 or 6 year old that everyone thought, oh my goodness, I don't know if this child will ever get it together. And I had the pleasure of seeing some of those children to go on and be fine high school students who were, winning awards and were talked about as the role models in the town. That's so important. The children need to develop that at an early age, and your anxiety will lower when you see that they can do it.
So what you're describing is the perfect scenario of challenging the fear, challenging the anxiety, letting the child feel more comfortable, more competent with their own abilities, growing, developing, being successful, and becoming good people.
Yes, and talking about children growing and developing and becoming successful, that brings me to my second most common top 10 anxiety for back to school. Will my child like his or her teachers? What if my child doesn't like his or her teachers? What will I do? What will my child do? I think that this is probably one of the top 10 things that parents are thinking about, whether your school lets people know in the end of June who the child's teacher will be for the following year, or it's something you don't find out until right at the end of the summer, or maybe even that first day of school. That is one of the top 10 anxieties. One of the things I think it's so important for parents to remember is, even if you're worried about that, hey, you've heard from your neighbors, you've heard from your friends in some group that you're in that this teacher or that teacher is really tough or mean or hard, or, the children hate being in that class. Try to, first of all, not keep that in your head, because again, everybody's child reacts to every adult in a different way. And just because one child had a negative experience doesn't mean that your child will have a negative experience. Secondly, even if you are not pleased with the placement of your child, do not let your child know that. If you're feeling concerned and you have some valid concerns, you can certainly speak to somebody at the school about those concerns. But whether or not the school will be able to make a change, you don't know. So if you tell your child, well, I'm going to take care of that, or you're definitely not going to be in that class, you're setting your child up for a very negative experience. What you can do to help your child is have a talk about having a positive attitude going in, trying your hardest, showing the teacher what a good child you are, that you try your hardest to work hard. Tell your child that the teacher is excited to meet your child, and that your child is going to be in a class that the teacher is happy to have them. Let your child get through those first days, a few days of school. Let your child go in with a positive attitude. You may find that everything that you were concerned about is not even true. If you start to have concerns, there are parent-teacher conferences and other excellent vehicles to deal with those problems. If your child says, but I can't do it, I wanted to be, or maybe your child just really liked another teacher. They saw other kids with that teacher last year. They had a nice rapport with them in the hallway. They had their heart set on being in that teacher's class. They think that teacher is so cool or so nice. You can say to your child, look, just because you're in one class doesn't mean that you're not going to still see that teacher in the school. Anything you can do to go in another room and cry if you need to, go in another room and be upset. Talk to your spouse about it, but don't talk in front of your child. And children are very good at hearing, and they don't just hear words, they hear the intonation in your voice. They can hear your attitude. So you need to be very, very careful about that.
The interesting thing that we're talking about here is, and as a family therapist, it's the family system. And we can spend a lot of time and pretend that kids don't have ears and they don't have eyes and they can't figure out what's going on, but kids always know what's going on. And if mom is upset about something, little Johnny knows what's going on, and he's going to do some things as a result of that.
You're absolutely right, Jeff. And also, children, when they hear that and they think that mom is upset, for example, they start to internalize that, and they might, in this case, I'm certainly not a family therapist, but as an educator, they might think, hey, my mom doesn't think I'm good enough to be in that class, or my mom doesn't think I can handle it. And maybe deep down inside, they kind of think they can. Maybe they're even looking forward to the challenge. But now, if they hear you being so upset, and you can certainly be honest with your child, it's very important to be honest. You can say, look, I understand how you're feeling. I can see why you might be worried. I've heard some of those things too. However, we're going to give this a try, because I know that when you get older, you're going to have more teachers, you're going to have jobs, you're going to be with different people, and we all need to learn how to work with others, how to get along with others, how to take direction from others. You can even relate it to something in your own world, in your own job and experience that you had. Talk to your child honestly, but also let your child know that you have confidence in them to be able to handle something. So important. So that kind of leads me to the third anxiety. It's not just about the teachers. Will my child be okay socially? Will she have friends in class, at lunch? What about recess? What if he or she comes home upset or says the other kids are being mean? What should I do? Well, one of the things that I've learned as a parent and as an educator is that what kids sometimes come home and tell us or don't tell us is really different than how they portray how they're feeling at school. I can't tell you how many times, especially as an administrator, a parent would come to me and say, my child comes home crying every day. He hates school. He doesn't get along with anyone in his class. He has no friends. He says he's always by himself at recess. I would be thinking, am I talking about the same child? Because I was outside and saw that child playing games and jump roping and having so much fun. High-fived the child in the hallway yesterday after recess. He says he had such a good time. Maybe it's not everything that's been going wrong. Maybe there was one time or one little incident that is bothering the child. Children often will hold in those feelings throughout the school day, or they go on to the very next thing. They haven't even thought about recess now in 3 hours. When you're 7 years old or 8 years old, recess that happened at 12 o'clock, by the time you go home from school, maybe you'd go on an after-school program, an activity, and mommy or daddy ask you that question, 20,000 other things in your mind have happened. But that child might be forgetting all the good things that happened that day and going back to that one thing that could probably be easily resolved by talking to the teacher or having the teacher talk to some other children. So start the conversation over again and say, hey, did something good happen today? There must have been one good thing. And if you're not getting anywhere with that, get really more specific. Well, I know you like to read, and I know you had reading today. What did you read today? What was the book you read? All of a sudden, that recess conversation is probably going to go by the wayside, and then you can still further explore that. But in that moment, your child will be calmer.
You have to put this in kid language, but to me it's always, tell me the anecdote of the day. Tell me the highlights of your day. Tell me the thing that happened. Tell me something you were excited about. Tell me something that you smiled about. Tell me something that made you laugh. Tell me something that was sad. Tell me something that was funny. And those kind of open-ended questions lead to lots of conversations.
Well, I could have used some of those days, and I came home as an educator, Jeff, and all I could think about at the end of the day were the challenges, and I forgot to sit down and think back on all the wonderful, wonderful things that happen. And so many things are wonderful in the life of children in schools. And middle schoolers, they are the ones that will, even in their class, they might look at you and act like they hate everything you're doing. But then there are those wonderful moments for middle school teachers where you get that glimmer where you realize the child was really excited about something. They might go home and tell their parent that they're very interested in something, or they might be actually asking to go watch a certain movie or to see something but their teacher may never even know they were interested. So it's really important to communicate in the other way. If your child suddenly has a deep interest in something, you might want to make sure that the educators know about that. And high schoolers, they're a whole nother breed. They just have so much going on. We all talk about the hormones and the social aspect of things, but I think there's so much pressure on teenagers now to be the best, and it's okay not to be the best at everything. So when it comes to social situations, that's important too. Not everyone is going to be the leader of the crowd, the leader of the pack, to use an old term. Not everyone is going to be the most popular child. High school students sometimes forget that what's important is finding that niche, finding the thing that you really love to do. You're going to find other kids that like the same thing as you, whether it's something related to coding, or it's something related to robotics, or whether it's music, or whether it's sports, or whether it's poetry, whatever it is, acting in a school play. Those are going to become your child's close friendship group. And that's a really important learning experience for as they move away from you and go on to college. So what you need to do is, instead of asking your child, do you have any friends? Do you have any friends? Do you have people that you hang out with? Do you have a social plan for this weekend? Say, hey, what have you been doing besides just, you're working so hard, you're studying, or maybe you need to study a little harder, but what else are you doing?
The open-ended questions.
Yes. And it's so important when questioning your child whether they're 5 years old or 18 years old, about how was their day. Be very careful in how you lead the questioning. Don't say to your child, did anybody make you upset today? Did the teacher give you too much homework today? Ask those more open-ended questions. Jeff, I'm sure you're a lot better at this than I am, but ask those open-ended questions, because you've got to be very careful to not, we talk about leading the witness in court and putting words into someone's mouth. Well, you have to be very careful with that with your own children, because given a moment, if you do that, they will go on and on and on, and you might not be getting the accurate whole picture again. You're just getting one tiny aspect.
But if, as a parent, if my anxiety is really high, then I'm going to say, did anybody say anything bad about you? And did anybody do this? Did anybody do that? Because that's my anxiety as a parent that's really raising up. And then I'm projecting my own anxiety onto my child, which is then going to make him or her even more anxious.
Yes.
And then we just have anxiety begetting anxiety begetting anxiety.
And what I'm going to say with that is that never ends well, because you literally go around in circles. You don't come to a point where you're resolving anything or helping your child problem solve something. You're just going around back in that circle again to that initial frustration, whatever it was that was bothering your child. Now you're stuck in that. You're stuck in that moment. And as the song says, it's very hard to get out of it. So you definitely want to be open-ended. And even if in the open-ended you end up on one thing that's really bothering your child, you don't have to resolve it all at once. I know there's a lot of fear out there as to what your child might do if they're feeling unhappy. Part of growing is sometimes not feeling 100% happy. Certainly, I know, Jeff, you would certainly know that there's certain signs to look for if it's more than that. But generally, just feeling a little unhappy or things didn't go my way today, that's part of growing up, and that's okay.
It's the resilience word used earlier. How can you teach resilience if the person has a perfect game each and every day? The best sports teams are the ones who lose games. They overcome disappointment. They overcome defeat. They overcome situations. They lose games that they should win. And then they have to come back the next day and play. They develop resilience as a team. They develop resilience as a franchise. And those are the ones that put together championships. But they don't put together a championship in a day or a game. They put together a franchise, a championship, a dynasty over weeks and months and the whole season.
Yes, and adversity is not necessarily a bad thing. However, parents, my 5th and 6th areas where parents feel a lot of very justifiable anxiety is, what if my child is really struggling academically? And what if my child gets frustrated with homework and studying? And we all know that those are both areas that affect the whole family. They can impact your night, your evening, your after school time. If homework becomes a struggle and it becomes a disaster where you have several children and maybe everyone has to vie for the use of a device, a computer, a Chromebook, an iPad. Maybe one child is having a really hard time focusing and the other children are too loud. We all know that as parents, that can be an incredibly challenging time for the family. It is not your job, unless you are homeschooling your child, it's not your job to teach your child. Therefore, my advice is, if your child is spending hours on homework and completely frustrated, you need to have either your child, depending on their age, reach out to the teacher and say, look, it's taking me this long to do this. That might not be typical. And if your child's too young, you can certainly email or ask that question of a teacher. If your child is spending 45 minutes on their math homework at night and the teacher intended it to be a 15-minute assignment, there may be a problem. This does not mean that your child has a learning difficulty, a learning disability. Certainly, if your child is having those types of struggles, there are many people that can help you at the school. It just might be that your child missed an explanation of something or wasn't quite sure of what the teacher went over or the math strategy to use. Perhaps that math strategy is too overwhelming for your child, or maybe it's too many problems for them to solve at one time, or they're just too tired. That is why it's so important to have that homeschool connection. You need to communicate to the teacher if it's getting out of control and you just need to put the homework down and say, I'm going to write a note. I would not suggest writing the note on your child's actual homework. That can make the child feel very badly about themselves. You might want to write a separate note. You might want to email. You can say to your teacher, is it okay to your child? Is it okay if I talk to the teacher? If the child says no, but you still feel that you need to, you can certainly talk to the teacher and say, my child felt uncomfortable with me having this conversation. And as the adults, you can take charge of a situation and work on it. If you are finding that homework time isn't going well at home, maybe you need to look for a different time for homework. Whatever your hours are, whatever your schedule is, maybe your child needs a break before they start their homework. I could certainly understand where you want them to get it all done before they go on to the fun things or other activities, but maybe it's just too much. Or maybe your child does need to come home and the first thing they do is their homework, because by the time they finish all their other activities, it's too late. Which, ironically, takes me to anxiety number 8. What if our family schedule and my work schedule gets too overwhelming? How am I going to handle it all? Is it bad that I need before and or after care for my child? And number 9, is my child involved in enough extracurricular activities? I don't think there is a magic number of how many activities or are good for your child or what are the right activities for your child. What parents need to be very careful of is not worrying about but everybody else does. There's a lot of pressure on children to fit in, and they may say, but everybody else is in Girl Scouts, or everybody else does soccer, or everybody else goes to Taekwondo. I want to do it too. I believe that you as the parent need to first be realistic and look at your family situation, your financial situation. Can you afford all of those activities? 2, your work schedule, your family time schedule, the things that are important to you as a family. And as a parent, you have the right to make that decision. Am I correct, Jeff, in that it's still your decision?
Well, it's always the parents' thing. And the most important thing becomes the work-life balance. How do you manage your work hours, your life hours? And for your child, it's their work-life balance too. Their life might be their extracurricular activities. Their work might be their school, but it's the same thing because everything has to be in harmony. Everything has to be in balance. And when things get out of balance, that's when people get super stressed. And when people get super stressed, then everything goes all over the place.
Absolutely. And when you look at your child, there might be an activity that was recommended for your child, perhaps even by the school, because they feel like your child needs to be in an activity where they learn to follow directions and rules. And that might be why, you took them into a sports activity such as soccer or baseball. Your child maybe needs something where they can get out their creative outlets a little bit more. Maybe they love to draw or they love to dance. You'll know your child, and the school can help you with that. If your child is saying to you, they just don't want to go, they just don't want to go, they just don't want to go. Well, it's important for children to follow through on commitments. You also have to be able to read your child. And if your child is just too tired or too miserable, then maybe you can make a deal with your child and say, look, we're going to finish out this session. And if at the end of a session you still feel that way, certainly there may be things in your own family life, your religious life, that are non-negotiables. You want your child to go to CCD. You think it's very important for your child to attend a program about your cultural heritage. Again, they might not be excited about that, but if it's very important to you, you as the adult can tell them that they need to do that. Please don't ever think, though, that anything that you're doing as a parent because of your work schedule or because you have several children at home and you just can't get everywhere at every time, or too much transportation, that it makes you a bad parent. I've heard parents say so many times to me, I'm a bad mom because I didn't do this or I didn't do that. I have very rarely ever met, if I ever have met anyone that I would consider to be a bad parent. Everyone is trying their best. You just need to decide priorities and help your child. That's a life skill for them to learn their priorities.
You took the words out of my mouth. I think if you're a mom, you're a mom. If you're a dad, you're a dad. The word bad never goes in front of that because the mom and or their dad or both, they're dealing with their situation. They're dealing with their stresses. They're dealing with their pressures. You can't be bad at it. You're just doing all the things that's in front of you. And again, there's no perfect parent. I've never seen one.
Nor are there any perfect children.
No perfect parents, no perfect children. What a concept. Perfection maybe is overrated.
Every child, I know this sounds very cliche, every child is special in their own way, is unique in their own way. That is why I loved and still love the idea of education and being an educator. It's a chance to, everyone says, mold the children. I think that the children burst out of those molds and they become these amazing people and amazing citizens in society. And you, as the years go on, can be so proud of where your child was and where they end up. Or maybe you look at your child who's grown now and say, boy, I should have known that when they were 5 years old, they did this or they did that. And I should have known that was the direction they'd go in, or that would be the kind of person they are. And you will feel such pride in that. But when you're in the moment, in the heat of the moment, and it's you've been a stay-at-home mom or dad all day, taking care of the house, taking care of the children, taking care perhaps of elderly parents, or whatever your responsibilities are. In 2018, people have so many responsibilities. Maybe you're constantly having to be connected online or on the phone or whatever your life involves. It's very hard not to start judging yourselves. I know you worry about the teachers judging you or the principal judging you or everyone else, the other parents judging you. I think parents are their hardest judges of all. And I believe that you deserve a chance to be a little less hard on yourself. One of the things, number 9, the anxiety that I think is that so many parents think, what will the people think of me? What will the school think of me? What will other parents, staff think of me? What will my children think of me if I'm not an evolved enough parent? What if I don't have time to volunteer for all those school activities, or go to all the PTA meetings, or participate in all the fundraisers or family fun nights? What if? Jeff, you said the what ifs.
I'm feeling anxious just listening to this. It's like, oh, I don't, what, and then when we think about it, okay, challenge it out. What's the absolute worst thing that's going to happen if I don't go to the parent PTA, to the parent fun night, what is the absolute worst thing that's going to happen? There isn't one.
Exactly. And of course I encourage parents, if you have opportunities to go with your family to family events that are provided through the school, if you have chances to join in with meetings, it's a great way for you to meet other parents who might be feeling the same way you are. It helps alleviate some of those feelings. If you have those opportunities, those are wonderful. But no one is sitting there and keeping a scorecard. Oh, Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so, they went to 20 of the activities this year and their children attended everything. But this kid only went to 16. That's not how it works.
It's not like baseball where we have a box score?
No, not that I'm aware of. I've certainly not seen those box scores, Jeff. But what I have seen is children feeling incredible pride, even if it's that one time they got to go with their parents to an activity and walk up with their parents and say hi to the teacher, or maybe it's not something that the teachers are involved in, maybe the principal's there, or maybe just other friends and say, hey, Mom, this is my friend so-and-so. That is a good opportunity for you to establish a play date for your child, to feel a part of the community. But no parent should ever feel that they're judging themselves. And if you are that parent who has the time and is able to volunteer a lot, please don't feel badly if you feel like other parents must think, oh, she must not have a life, or he doesn't have a life because he has time to do that. Everything you do as a parent to do anything to benefit your child is good. You're not being a bad parent. You're showing involvement. You care about your child. Children are very savvy. They pick up on that. They know if their parents care. They know if their parents are not spending enough quality time or concern for them. And in those situations, which again, I'm going to say are rare, there are probably things going on that are very overwhelming in your life right now, and you don't know how to make it all work and all get together. And I can say that you should reach out in those cases. Reach out to the school, whether it's a school counselor, reach out to someone, as Jeff would say, outside of school. Talk to someone and say, hey, I need help getting I don't know what to do. I want my child to be involved in things. There are so many agencies, and there are township things such as recreation departments where maybe you don't have time to take your child to something, but maybe a neighbor or someone else does. You should never feel alone. Everybody is parenting. It's they say it takes a village. It's really true in this world where we're so stuck on communicating through text messages and emails and things like that. It can feel very isolating. but there are people that can help you and your child feel a little bit better. And one of the things that I think is the top 10, and I'll stop with this one, but number 10, how can I keep my child physically healthy? Everyone worries when their children start to go to school. What if the flu's going around? What if there's a lot of germs? What if my kid doesn't eat their lunch? What if, my child doesn't wash their hands after they go to the bathroom? Things like that. You can do everything you can to make those reminders to your child. You can find out from the school what they do to keep children healthy. You can always talk to a school nurse. Your child, as they get older, can certainly, if they're feeling very tired all the time at school, maybe they need to go see the school nurse at their high school. If they don't want to come talk to you, they can talk to the school nurse. Schools are healthy places full of children, teenagers, young adults who, whether they say it or not, want to learn and want to feel healthy and safe. And I think that's how we started all of this.
Went right back in a perfect circle. Today's episode has certainly been informative, addresses a lot of the issues that go into the beginning of the school year. It's easy to understand how people would have anxiety about the multitude of factors that go into going to school, the stresses and pressures that get into schoolwork. The best part is that there are many resources available in terms of the school, outside of the school, and here at Brandler Bits. If you are recognizing that you have some of that anxiety that we addressed, you can go to the website, www.changeispossible.org. You can go to the sidebar where there are many episodes that discuss anxiety. If you're doing this on your mobile phone, just go into the blog section, go to Brandler Bits, and you'll see all the episodes as well. I'm Jeff Brandler. This is Brandler Bits. We'll be back soon with another episode of Brandler Bits.